Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming and watching our ISEP South Korea pre-departure orientation. And so, first, just as introductions, hi, everybody. Many of you know me already still, but my name is Rachel Brown. I'm your Student Services Officer for the Asia region here in the ISEP Global Office, and I'll pass it on to my colleague Brian to introduce himself too.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Brian Min. I serve as the ISEP South Korea Program Advisor, and I am based in Seoul, South Korea. It's nice to meet you all.
Thank you. So yes, so we have an agenda today, a couple of topics we're going to go over. First, we'll talk about culture and daily life, which Brian will help me out with in terms of a couple of items there. Then we have academic matters. We'll go over health and safety, before you go and things to remember, essentially as you're preparing for your program, and then how to keep in touch with ISEP while you're on your program. So first, we'll go over life in South Korea. So, in terms of just general facts about the country, South Korea is a peninsula with a population of more than 50 million people living there. There's a variety of different landscapes there, including mountains, the sea. There's also definitely an urban environment in many of the big cities, especially Seoul, the capital. Overall, it's a very temperate climate with very warm and humid summers, but then also cold and dry winters, about split 50-50 throughout the year. Overall democratic country, and then also a very homogenous country too, with a very rapidly globalizing society. So you'll find that there's a very small percentage of people in Korea who aren't Korean, a very small percentage, but overall the society is also rapidly changing. And there's no national religion. However, there's a considerable Buddhist and Christian following too. In terms of the overall South Korean culture, so virtually all Koreans speak the Korean language and Hangul, which they learn while they are growing up. And that also has some affinities to Japanese and Chinese loan words. So you'll hear that if you're familiar with those languages peppered around the language too. And then there's also a prevalence of English loan words too, as well. And that's a product of the globalized society too. English literacy also continues to be on the rise too as well. So you hear that there are a lot of people, especially if you're going to be in Seoul, who actually know English too as well as a second language. Confucianism dominates philosophical and political thought. So lots of respect. Respect is highly valued. Honoring your elders and this idea of saving face and keeping the peace when you are in meeting somebody else or in a group of people. Family relations are also a very important part of Korean culture. So you'll see that there are a lot of people who are very close to their nuclear family too, even throughout their adulthood. Patriarchal values are rooted in culture, but new progressive policies are also definitely changing this. And you'll see, especially amongst the younger generation, new ideas about gender equality and certain things like that. It's definitely a divide too, and there's also a lot of changing ideas around it, which goes into the last point about the generational gap. As a result of globalization, you may see that the older generation may have different ideas about things than the other younger people you may meet. So I'll pass it on to Brian.
Yeah, and a little bit more of culture of South Korea and how that impacts your daily life here in Korea. We are known for our hardworking and industrious culture. So when you come to Korea, you will find the locals work beyond 9 to 5 jobs. It actually runs from 9 to 6 or 10 to 7. So what that means is that, we'll have extended hours of rush hour. So watch out for that. Yes, we are a family-oriented culture, but that doesn't mean that we don't hang out with our colleagues and our friends. We definitely do, since things don't close until late night. So we would go out and have meals, and a lot of stress. So maybe you will partake in that as well. As Rachel mentioned in the previous slide, we do respect hierarchical relationships, which are defined by seniority. So, showing respect to the elders and seniors, that is something that is highly important in our culture. And moving on to the next slide, um, it is connected to what we are just talking about. Korean people value courtesy, politeness, and self-control as means to maintain harmonious relationships, especially with elders and the seniors. And so, reading between the lines and sensing the counterparts' emotions and their feelings, as you see on the screen, something we would call 기분 or 눈치. These are some of the tools that you want to be comfortable with and practice, of course. You may feel that because we put so much emphasis on harmonious relationships, sometimes we tend to be non-confrontational, and that's something that you want to be mindful of as well. Moving on to the next slide. Non-Koreans are referred as 외국인, which mean foreigners. And like Rachel mentioned earlier, yes, we are becoming more global and international. We are a homogeneous culture. However, this word 외국인, foreigner, has no inherent negative connotation to it. Now, Korea has formal language and informal language, and with strangers, especially or the first time meeting, you will definitely use polite grammar. So that often ends with 요 or 다. So you want to pay attention to that as well. Of course, we bow, but you don't want to fold yourself in half. You just want to bow slightly, which is a common greeting, whether that's your first time or the second time, and so on. As you see on the bottom picture, this is a subway. Strangers that you will see in the subways or other public spaces, we tend not to converse or engage in lots of interactions. So just, keep that in mind, especially if you are, handing or receiving objects with strangers, you want to be polite and respectful. And how you do that is using your two hands or using your right arm while placing your left arm under your elbow. And right back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. So yes, well now we'll talk a little bit about housing and just general expectations. So if you're going to be living in Seoul, it's very densely packed. So in terms of the studios or the rooms that you might be living in, they tend to be a little bit narrow. So if you're not used to that, maybe if you're from the US, for example, that's just an expectation to be ready for. Most local South Korean students do live at home during university, or they also live in the dorms if they are coming from far away. But you might meet another local student and they might tell you that they are living with their family. So that's something that's pretty normal. So, in general, in terms of if you're going to be living in a dorm or any sort of shared space, these are things that we want you to keep in mind and remember. So, if you're living in a dormitory specifically, there may be central heating or air. So, just be mindful of your consumption. A lot of times, you won't have the ability to change the temperature in your own room. And that's just essentially how it's set up. And it's also for conservation purposes. Expect curfews and noise restrictions, I think, especially if you're going to live in the dormitory. So, your host ISIP coordinator will brief you about this information. So, make sure that you pay attention to those rules and you don't get any sort of violations. Trash has to be separated very, very carefully in Korea. This is everywhere. So there's a lot of separation or things that you have to remember in terms of having bottles and cans in one place, food waste in one place, non-food waste, but still trash in other ones. They all have to be separated. So again, too, this should be briefed during orientation, but please pay attention because you can be fined if you do the wrong thing. There may be gender regulations too as well. So just remember to, if you have any sort of rules in terms of not allowing another gender onto your floor in your room, please abide by that. You can still connect with your other students, other shared areas too as well. So we encourage you to take advantage of that, meet up other places, but those are rules that you may see. But lastly, just overall, the general reminder and advice is to read your announcements from your host university very, very clearly and carefully. Okay, so next we'll talk a little bit about meals in South Korea. I'm sure many of you may be fans of it already, but in terms of South Korean cuisine, it's very flavorful and also very diverse. So mixing fresh vegetables, pickled vegetables like kimchi, eggs, and cooked meats, you'll see a lot of these different ingredients in a lot of different dishes. So definitely if you have any sort of dietary restrictions, it's best to learn how to express them in Korean beforehand, learning how to say that phrase and how to express that to the person, to the server that you're meeting so they are aware. But also remembering that, especially if you go to maybe a smaller shop like a mom and pop, they may not be able to offer a specific substitution for a dish, especially, for example, say like if it's fish stock that's like included within the dish and you can't eat fish. There's some things that you'll have to be mindful of, but it's best to try and learn how to say your dietary restrictions so you can express that to somebody. Some foods can be spicy. So there's a red paste that's called gochujang. And so you might see if you see a dish that's very red, it's probably likely seasoned with that. So some foods can be spicy, but you can also try and ask if you don't want it to be too spicy. They could, a lot of times they can make that adjustment if needed. There's lots of delivery options, but just so you know, if you are trying to order chicken or anything like that to where you're living, you may need to have a Korean SIM card so you have a number. So that's just something to remember. Many non-Korean cuisines are available throughout the city. So American food, French, a lot of Japanese places, even halal foods, a lot more spots are opening up. But just so you know, it may be a little bit more expensive, obviously, because of importing the ingredients to make those dishes. One thing to remember is to try and cover your mouth if you're talking with somebody, if possible. It's just polite again too. This idea of politeness and keeping the peace while you're talking with somebody. And then it's also considered impolite to point your chopsticks at somebody if you're speaking to them, but and also if you leave them sticking out in the bowl, it's actually very rude. So make sure that if you are taking a pause or you are done eating, that you put your chopsticks right next to your bowl or plate. And then for ISEP exchange students, many of you are going to be receiving a meal stipend to cover your meals throughout your program. So make sure that you're checking your ISEP acceptance package for more details, and then also going to orientation so you understand when you're going to get that money, which you can use either on or off campus. So next about restaurants specifically and just some more sort of advice about how to navigate those spaces. So some traditional style restaurants will ask you to remove your shoes. It definitely depends on the establishment, but if you're asked this again, please don't be too surprised. If you are trying to call over a server, there's a number of different things that could happen. So you may need to press a button to call your server over. A lot of times these days, there's QR codes that you can use, or also kiosks that you're going to go to order your food, and then you have a buzzer that you use. But if you also go to just a typical shop where there's a server that's bringing your food, you can always just try and call them. You can say "저기요," you can say that, and then that essentially means excuse me. So if you just try and call them over that way, then they'll come over to you. You'll be given chopsticks, but again, if you need a fork, for a lot of establishments, you can just ask and they'll give it to you. A lot of times they'll also automatically give you a spoon as well that you can use to eat your rice. But if you need a fork, just let them know. Again, there's no need to be shy about it. And then sharing food is definitely expected to as well. Again, this depends on where you're going, what type of meal you're going to be eating. But for a lot of traditional Korean foods, if you're ordering it a really big plate, you're expected to share it with whoever you're with. And then cooking and grilling your own food is very popular. So if many of you are familiar with Korean barbecue, for example, so you will be expected to cook your food a little bit, but if you do need help, again, let your server know. It's okay. There's no expectation to be perfect at it too as well. And sometimes they'll come to you automatically to come help you out. So if you need help to just, again, flag your server and they can help you. And there's no need to tip as well. So there's no expectation to do that. And then lastly, convenience stores are super common. So if you are budgeting or you're trying to find something quick to eat, there shouldn't be too much of an issue to find one. There's many places like GS25, CU, 7-Eleven, everywhere that you can get a quick snack, even some places where you can cook your own ramen, for example. So definitely take advantage of that if you have to sort of budget throughout the week. And then next, talking a little bit about technology in South Korea. So overall, the country is a tech-driven nation and a global leader when it comes to this. So many things are have been made and updated to be convenient for the people. So one thing is reloadable cash cards that you can use throughout the city. There's a lot. You can get this and you can use this in a lot of different places. So make sure that you try and get one of these cards early on in your program so you can have it and can use it. Satellite TV access is essentially everywhere. So that's something that's really great and unique. So if you can get connected to that, definitely take a look at that and if you're interested in watching TV. But one thing to note is that Google and Apple location services are typically not used, and especially in the case of Google, it typically does not work if you're trying to do location services. So what we recommend is trying to use things like Kakao Map or Naver Map instead if you're trying to navigate somewhere because those work a lot better. What we also recommend doing, again, going back to that point I mentioned, if you're trying to do things like delivery or make reservations, is trying to get access to a local SIM card that you can use in country. And so you can either get this at the airport typically, you can make reservations to pick one up at the airport and other locations, or you can try and purchase this in advance completely and then just put it in your phone when you need it. So there's a couple of options that you can look into to do this. There's Aralo, there's eSIM Korea, and then Trazy is a great one if you're trying to do that reservation and then pick it up later. But Aralo is also great because you can also buy data packages for other countries too if you're going to travel. So these are some options that you can at least start for your search. Korea uses Type C and Type F plug. So these are two prongs, and you can see the picture here as well. So what I would recommend is getting an adapter too as well if you're going to be bringing your items from your country, and then getting that so you can be able to use it in the plugs that you see. And then lastly, I highly recommend getting a Kakao Talk. It's a free messaging service that the locals use. It's free and essentially everybody you meet when you're making local friends is going to be using it. So I highly encourage getting one and making an account before you get there. And I'll pass
All
it back to
right.
Brian. Mhm.
All right. Now let's talk about finance in South Korea. Of course, the rate fluctuates, but usually 1,000 Korean won is a little bit less than a dollar, US dollar, so 86 cents or so. If you forgot to get your currency exchange, don't worry. We have the booth in the main tourist areas as well as the central areas of large cities. Banks, they stay open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., but don't worry about that if you're looking for the ATMs because you can not only find them in the nearest banks, but also in convenience stores, subways, and malls as well. International credit cards like American Express, Visa, and MasterCards definitely they're accepted here. So, if you have them, you can use them as well. If you are creating a bank account here for your stipend, you can also apply for a local bank card, of course. But if that's the case, we recommend that you ask your host university ISEP coordinator for help, of course. Something that we'll talk about on the next slide as well, but if you are thinking about saving some money while using public transportation, one of the recommendations we have is using Climate Card. This was newly introduced in 2024 in the effort to go green in South Korea, which the more public transportation you use, the more discount you get. And the last thing, I am sure you will explore the traditional markets at some point when you are in South Korea. Now, some places they do accept cards, but not all places do. So make sure you carry your cash as well. And moving on to the transportation. Now, this is something that Rachel already mentioned in the previous slide, but we'll go through that again. Now, Google Maps, they don't really work very well here in South Korea, definitely not in Seoul, for a variety of reasons. But for that reason, we recommend you using local applications such as Neighbor Map or Cacao Map. Now, Neighbor Map tends to have a more improved English interface, but we recommend that you check out both and see what fits better for you. If you are ready to expand your horizon and get out of the city, we recommend you check out KTX trains or the SRT train system. These are high-speed rail system, and you will be able to go places in 2 or 3 hours. And so we totally recommend that. But if you're looking for more affordable ways to travel within the country, we of course suggest inner city buses. They do take a little bit longer, but the fares tend to be much cheaper. Now, we cannot talk about Korea without mentioning subways. We have some of the most covered um, subway systems in the world. And with that, what you'll definitely be comfortable with is using T-Money card. That's a transportation card, and Subway Korea app. Now, Subway Korea app is something that you can use without using Wi-Fi or data. And so that comes handy when you are trying to find your destinations. T-Money card is, of course, a day-to-day transportation card, but a substitute is something that we've mentioned earlier called Climate Card. Taxis, you can find them pretty much everywhere, of course, depending on where you're situated. Um, but one thing that we would recommend is using Uber or Kakao T. Those are really good ride-sharing apps where you can punch in your destinations and see how long that would take, as well as how much that would cost. So we recommend using those as well. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. So now we'll talk a bit about sports and leisure. So baseball and football or soccer for Americans are most popular Korean sports. So there definitely, if you're interested, there's definitely lots of games that happen to around these seasons that your host university also might be giving tickets out or hosting gatherings for. So definitely take advantage of that. They're great events. Kite flying is a national pastime too, as well. So again, too, if you'll be here during the warm months, definitely take a look and check out some of the events that are happening around that. But also, too, cycling, hiking, and running are also very popular pastimes for people to do in their free time. Generally, people are very active, especially too if you're going to be living in Seoul. You'll see a lot of people walking around during breaks in their day, and there's lots of parks around the city too as well. So definitely, we encourage you to try that out. It's very great scenery, very great break from the hustle and bustle of things. And then there's also lots of places to go to towards the outskirts of the city if you want to go, again, as we mentioned, to go hiking too, because of the mountains that are nearby. People do tend to dress up if they're going to be going out and about to town too. So, in terms of like wearing like sweatpants to go out, all of those things, like you might not see that as often. So, that's just like in terms of what people tend to wear. There's very big drinking and also big smoking culture. So just something to be aware of that you might see around too. So if you're going to establishments like bars, or if you're going to restaurants and to places like that, you might see a lot of people engaging in that. But yes, there are so many shops everywhere. So one thing we always hear from ISEP students is that they wish they packed a little bit less. So definitely try and buy smart. Don't overdo it too much. Pace yourself and really think critically about what you want to buy and what you really want to keep. Next, we just went over a couple of major holidays and vacation periods to be mindful of. So feel free to pause the presentation and take a look at this. But these are just some holidays where it'll be very likely that you won't have classes, and then also a lot of establishments might be closed. So these are just things to be mindful of. Also great days though if you want to go and travel too as well. So definitely try and maybe put it on your calendar so you can keep in mind. And yeah, there's a traditional holidays here as well, but then also some other holidays. Christmas, for example, pretty much celebrated worldwide. So yeah. And that's Brian.
Yeah, some of the fun facts that you may know already or that we would like you to know. Hangul, which is our Korean alphabet, was created about 600 years ago with the goal to have common people easily read and understand the common language. So, what that means to us is that we take such a pride and love for our Korean language, and we very much appreciate when international folks try to learn Korean when they're visiting Korea. So some of the suggestions that we recommend, you can see on the screen for learning Korean language. So check those out. If you are a big coffee person or dessert person, Korea is a great place to be in. Cafe hopping, that's one of the activities that locals love doing. So perhaps that's one thing that you want to um, explore as well using Naver Map and Kakao Maps as we talked about in previous slides. We do tend to dress a bit conservatively with less skin showing, unlike what we would see on pop culture. So just keep that in mind as you go around. And trash cans, they're really hard to find. So make sure that you look out for them while you are outside. And moving on to the next slide, Korea is a very unique culture, I would say. So, culture shock is bound to happen, and it is real. And, there will be a transition period from honeymoon to distress stages, which can be really challenging. But that's okay. That happens to everyone. And what we recommend is that, we want you to read through the culture shock handout for tips on how to deal with it. Now, I will give you an example of what kind of culture shock that you may experience in Korea. One of the things that Koreans would do is commenting on something that they see about your appearance on the first meeting. Now, they mean well. They want to get to know you. They want to give you compliments, and they want to be more close to you. But, if you're not used to that, that may feel strange and different to you. That can be a good example of a culture shock. Well, when that happens, we do recognize that that's different. And that's something that you may not be able to change overnight. But perhaps you could write about it, make a record of it, and revisit it as you learn and grow and experience different things in Korea and Korean culture and how that um, would impact um, your time here in the future.
Mhm. Yeah. So, in terms of other tips and things to just remember to as well. So, definitely try your best to make local friends and seek out those opportunities, especially when you have that opportunity or your host university is holding those events. You can definitely make some connections that can last you a lifetime. So, we definitely encourage maybe stepping out of your comfort zone and trying to go to those events, make an effort with the language, as Brian was talking about before. Definitely, people are very welcoming if you try and speak Korean to them too. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Try your best. It's definitely okay. Take advantage of the resources for international students as well. So your international student office is a safe space. It's a hub for you to go to if you need assistance. Definitely don't be shy to go to your host ISEP coordinator throughout the semester if you just need guidance or assistance. That's what they're there for. Try and set goals for yourself. You definitely don't have to rush anything. It's a marathon, not a sprint when it comes to study abroad and enjoying those new experiences. So try and pace yourself and tell yourself maybe next week I'll try this new cafe, or maybe by the end of the month I'll try and do go to a city, different things like that, a new city. So set your goals, and then you'll look back and you'll be very excited about the new things that you did. We mentioned too on the other slide, but keeping a blog or journal so you can look back and take a look at your time once you are back home, and you'll have those fond memories to keep forever. And then definitely try and believe in your own ability to solve problems and be proactive. Again, going to study abroad, you're there to learn. You're there not to only learn in the classroom, but to learn in everyday life. So you will face some challenges, you'll face new things, but you do have the ability to get through it. So definitely don't doubt yourself. If you need help, definitely reach out, but don't doubt yourself too. You can do it. So
Yeah, and add to that, we have full confidence that you will independently figure out cultural differences. But also, we want to emphasize the importance of staying connected to your ISEP coordinators. They are ready to help you when you reach out. So make sure you reach out if you are in situations where you need help.
yes, for sure. So, yeah, to finish up this section, these are just some reflections we got from past ISEP students about their time after they went abroad. Again, too, you can feel free to pause and read through these, but this is some advice that I think would definitely resonate with all of you to think about. So, there's different advice here, like one, for example, learning how to make use of the resources readily available to you. Again, there's going to be a lot of information you're going to be receiving all at once, but it's all there to assist you depending on how you need it to as well. So always take your time to sit down, think about who you can reach out to. It's all there for you somewhere. It just may take a little bit of searching and looking through. But yeah, feel free to read through these. These are advices straight from ISEP students to help guide you while you're on your programs. So yeah, that rounds out the culture and life in Korea. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the academics portion. So, in terms of higher education system in South Korea, so one academic year in Korea has 2 semesters. So the first semester is typically going to be from March to June. That's the spring, and that's the first semester. And then the second semester is typically from September to December for the fall. So there's also typically 2 large vacations, one in the summer from July to August, and then one in the winter from December to February. In a lot of the larger universities, approximately 30% of the courses are going to be taught in English. It definitely depends, however, by the department. There may be some departments that do have more global faculty, but so it just depends on the subject that you're looking to take for your specific program. But again, as we mentioned way in the beginning of the presentation, many students learn Korean for their own professional advancement too as well. So you may see other local students in your classes because they are also trying to practice and build their English proficiency to an advanced level. In terms of the campus culture, so orientation is typically a very large campus event. You may have one that's very specific for your international study abroad program, and then there may be a larger student body orientation or orientation week too as well. It's very normal for students to dress up going to class. It can depend on the campus too, but don't be surprised again too. If you go to your classroom, people aren't wearing hoodies and sweatpants, things like that. It's pretty common amongst younger Korean students maybe to not dress like that when they are going to class. But again, you can always talk to your host ISEP coordinator about what's expected, if there's anything that's you definitely shouldn't wear, things like that. Um, Students tend to socialize more outside of the classroom too, again, so you may be in class and maybe students are not maybe talking too much during the break time, all of that stuff, but you'll find that a lot of students are trying to meet after classes to go get coffee, to study together. So that's one thing you may see. Um, there's also a prevalence of festivals too as well, especially if you're going to some of our larger sites in South Korea. They often hold these festivals for students to have fun, and these festivals can include live DJs, celebrity appearances, and even student-run activities too as well. So they're usually the highlight of the semester or highlight of the year. So definitely keep an eye out for that and partake. It's a great way to also engage in school spirit and enjoy that too. But again, as we've been saying up until now, definitely check your international office bulletin boards for cultural exchange programs and opportunities to meet other local students. This is definitely recommended too if you're trying to do language exchange programs. You can meet other local students who are also trying to improve their language skills or meet other international students, network, things like that. So definitely take a look out for that because those can be the best ways to make local friends. In terms of the grading system, so emphasis is typically put on the final exam or project grade, which can be different if you're used to always getting assignments that you do every single week. You're graded on that all incrementally add up to your grade. A lot of times it might just be one final test or a midterm and then a test that you have to take. So be ready for that too and get ready to be studying towards that exam and pace yourself for that exam. In terms of the grading scale is typically from A to F. Usually A is the highest, and then from there, there's usually like an A plus. Sometimes you'll see something that says like A0, which is the equivalent of just like an A or just a B, and then A minus. So, but it also can depend on the university. So always ask your host ISEP coordinator if you have questions. But if you need help with your courses, we definitely encourage taking initiative and asking your professor for resources. Some universities may not have as much of a hands-on approach. So if you do need help, if you're struggling, you may have to vocalize that to your professor yourself. So be ready to do that. But if you're not ready to do that or you want to find other avenues to study, definitely try and set up study groups with other students, international students in your classes. There are a lot of ways to connect with other students, for example, during orientation. And as you know, we do at ISEP send out connect forms to students. So we definitely encourage to use those avenues to try and connect if you do want to set things like that up. In terms of the credit system and the course load, most courses are about 3 credits each. Again, it depends too, though, on the type of courses you're taking. So, for example, if you're trying to take studio art credits, for example, for those of you who are taking architecture, those can be more credits per class, like 6 per class. But in general, you can expect a course to be around 3 credits. 1 credit can usually be around 50, or I'm sorry, 16 hours of classwork too. And then in terms of the conversion, this is what we generally recommend at ISEP. But again, too, you are always going to have to go to your home university to understand what conversion that they're going to do. But in general, Korean credits are equivalent to US credits. And then they're usually a 1-to-2 ratio to ECTS and then a 1-to-4 ratio to UK credits. But again, make sure you talk to your home university registrar and your offices to check that. Because at the end of the day, you are responsible for making sure you enroll in sufficient credits as determined by your home university. So your host university may say that you can take a minimum of 1 class, 2 class, and you're still enrolled in the program, but your home university may have their own requirements for you to be considered a full-time student. So make sure you understand that conversion well before you get on campus. In terms of registration, so course registration typically is held online and it's usually up to the students to enroll in the classes that they want through this online registration. You may have multiple rounds of registration, but typically it's all going to happen online. You should contact your host ISEP coordinator for more details on the registration process too as well. Again, they've been through this many times before. They can assist you and clarify things. You will likely get very thorough instructions, but if something is not entirely clear, make sure you reach out to them well before the registration happens. Make sure you check your pre-departure or orientation materials to also check if there's an add drop period. We definitely understand maybe you try a course and it's just not your vibe. Maybe it's just doesn't work out for you. That's okay. If there's a period where you can add and drop and change your courses, you're going to want to know when that is so you can look to it if you're going to need it. And then only classes that students register for officially appear in your transcripts too. This can also depend on the institution. There might be some institutions where if you withdraw from a class, they don't include it. It definitely depends. So again, to make sure you understand how that's going to work if you're dropping or changing a course, how it's going to impact on your records. And then next, we'll talk about interactions with professors specifically. So for the most part, the higher education system is very similar to the American or Westernized models of teaching. So you might find that it's not too different if you are from America or the West. There is, however, a very strict attention to rules and regulations. So expect absentee policies and the expectation that you should be coming to classes. So again, it may not be as lax as maybe what you're used to at your home institution, and that's the expectation for all students, including international students. So please be ready for that. Again, too, it shows respect when you follow those rules to your professors. Um, tend to be competitive about their grades. This is in reference to local students in Korea too. So you may find students who are very diligently studying for these final exams, taking them very seriously, come from ideas of having a very good grades and having a very good rank. It's seen as very important, and it can also attribute to status too in Korean society. So you may see that amongst other local students. But what we recommend doing with your professors too in the beginning of the semester is introducing yourself to them and telling them that you're an exchange student from whatever country you are from. So it's very important to be proactive about the expectations, to let your professor know where you're coming from, and then building that relationship with them again too, because it can make it easier later, maybe if you need help, for them to understand where you're coming from. Some professors might have a more hands-off approach, like we mentioned before. So again, it's usually better to let your professor know directly if you need help from them or if they have resources to assist you. But if you have further questions about this, we do have a section in our country handbook called the education system that you can always go to get more information about this. So yeah, so next we'll talk a little bit about health and safety. So just some critical health and safety resources and reminders. So you should also be receiving the full health and safety presentation, or if you haven't received it, you'll receive it very soon. That's also mandatory to watch. So we encourage you to watch that thoroughly and take notes and keep in mind the information from that presentation. Remember too, the ISEP emergency line, that is the number there. This number is available 24/7. You'll always be put in touch with an ISEP employee. So make sure you have this on hand and write it somewhere too. You can review your insurance coverage that you get from CISI, which is our insurance providers, on the summary of benefits page that we have on our website. So if you have questions about what is going to be covered, should you run into a situation, an accident, sickness, illness abroad, there's a brochure that you can download so you can go over that with your parents if need be. Contact your country's embassy in South Korea. We definitely recommend doing that because oftentimes they have a traveler alert program that you can enroll in by setting up your travel, and then you can get regular alerts for things that you need to be aware of. So we definitely encourage doing that because staying in touch with your embassy is good if any sort of emergencies arise. Provide your local contact information in your ISA portal for us. This is really important because if we need to reach you and you've changed your phone, you got a new SIM card, we at ISEP will definitely want to know so we can know the best way to get to you. So you can input that information in your ISEP dashboard. It's on the left-hand side where it says provide your contact information. And then find out the best way to get updates from your host institution. This is likely something that they'll go over during orientation. There can be university-wide text alerts or a bulletin board that they have. They may have a group chat for all ISEP students. They may send out emails. Make sure you know where you need to go when you need to get important information from. In terms of health and safety, specifically in South Korea, so it's important to familiarize yourself with the emergency contact information in your ISEP dashboard. So in that information, under your health and safety information in that tab, there's also information for the emergency contacts that you should reach out to if something happens. This is if you need immediate assistance. So we recommend doing that maybe before calling the ISEP line if you do definitely need somebody to help you right then and there. In addition to seeing the information on who to contact, you'll also see information for on-site services and also information on mental health as well, and services to go to if you need to set that up. In terms of emergencies in South Korea, so these are some important numbers to keep in mind in terms of the crime or if any sort of anything related to that happens, you can call 112. The police in Korea is definitely very approachable as well. So please don't be afraid. If you really feel that you are not in danger, it is okay to call them. It is their duty to help all citizens, all residents who are staying in South Korea. So encourage you to call that number if you really feel like you need an officer to come help you. But also similarly to that too as well. For fire and medical services, you can call 119. This similarly as well, in terms of clinics and hospitals in South Korea. These are also very accessible for any sort of treatment. So again, please do not be afraid if you hurt yourself and you can't get yourself to a nearest medical hospital to call that number so you can get an ambulance. It's all very accessible, and then a lot of these expenses are also covered within your insurance through ISEP too. And then generally, if you need to ask for assistance for information, you can call 114. But overall, Korea is one of the safest countries in the world. And then specifically Seoul as a city is also very walkable at night. Transportation runs pretty late too as well. And then the city is also definitely very walkable. But of course, you want to be aware of your surroundings. Anything could happen, but in general, Seoul is very, very safe. So, but we also recommend considering calling a taxi. If you are traveling around late, it's a good idea to do that, especially if you're in somewhere where you don't recognize where you are or you're very far from campus. Some other general reminders about health insurance. We do go over this in the health and safety presentation, so I'll just go over this very quickly. But make sure to print and carry your health insurance ID cards in your wallet at all times. For non-emergency medical problems, first visit your university health services. So those are right near you. And then if you need to be referred to a specialist or a hospital for further treatment, that's usually what they'll do. But definitely try, if it's not a life or death situation, to go to your university health services. Again, too, hospitals and clinics in Korea are very accessible for all types of treatment. So if you're referred to go to a hospital, do not panic. Hospitals can treat students for a variety of treatments from very serious to not as serious. Typically, you'll be required to pay for your medical expenses yourself, and then submit a claim to request reimbursement. So what you'll do is you'll pay out of pocket, but then you can go to CISI and ask for a reimbursement of all covered fees. So if you do run into a situation where you actually cannot pay the bill right up front too, however, you can contact AXA assistance as soon as possible. You can call them and they can help set up a guarantee of payment. Save all medical documentation and receipts. The ISEP Health and Safety Program will cover any medical costs above the $50 deductible, and they'll cover a variety of expenses, and all that's listed in our brochure. And lastly, for you to know, students will automatically be enrolled in Korean National Health Insurance when you get your registration card. So this is something that you'll be briefed on during orientation as well. This is automatic for all students, but just for you to know, you can waive out of this insurance with proof of your CISI insurance. So stay tuned for further announcements from ISEP about how to do this. But for you to know, this is just for you to be aware of that this is going to happen. In general, in terms of personal safety. So a lot of this should be common sense as well, but try to pay attention to security warnings and on-site orientation briefings about what you should do, where you shouldn't go, etc. And pay attention to alerts if there's a widespread issue or matter that's happening in the country. Be aware of and comply with all local laws. You're not immune to the laws just because you're not a citizen or you're studying abroad there. Please make sure you abide by everything. Be aware of your surroundings, wherever you're going, especially if you're going somewhere that's pretty far off campus. It's a good idea to travel in pairs or small groups rather than traveling completely alone, especially at night. Avoid bad neighborhoods or protests, any sort of situation where you feel like you can put yourself at risk. It's best to just um, not get involved with that and trust your gut. So remove yourself from those situations and get to somewhere where you do know you're safe is the best thing to do. And if you choose to consume alcohol, please do so in moderation, so you can also keep yourself safe. So next note before you go, when it comes to packing, so it definitely varies when we're thinking about the weather and clothing. It varies when throughout the year in Korea. So in the winter, it's cold, but it can be pretty sunny too. In the summer, it can be very hot, cloudy, and also humid. And then the spring and autumn are quite short, but they're pleasant and usually very nice weather. So it's really important to try and pack clothes generally for all types of weather. But you can also purchase clothes while you're in Korea. But it's a good idea to, if you're going this summer, for example, you can pack clothing that's good for warm weather, but maybe also try and pack like a small jacket or windbreaker too, just in case. And when it comes to toiletries, so some products like toothpaste, shampoo, they can have a different chemical makeup than what you're used to. Another thing too, for example, like deodorant is not too common in South Korea, and if it is available too, it can also be a little bit pricey too. So just make sure that if you have something that you need personally, something you need medically, it's probably best to bring your own too because it could be different when you get there. Medications, we do have information about this on our ISEP website, but it's important to try is bring as much as your medication that you're going to need with you. And if you are going to need to refill it, it's important to know where you can go to refill that. So you can also use your AXA assistance through the insurance you get with ISEP to also set up a continuation of care if you have questions about medication. If you have questions on this, please feel free to reach out to me, your student services officer. Electrical needs too, as well. Again, as we talked about before, the voltage, the plugs and everything, try and get an adapter if you need it. Pack paper copies of important documents and put it in your carry-on. Don't put it in your check bag because unfortunately anything can happen to your check bag. It may not get to you by the time you get to Korea. So make sure you put it in your carry-on so it's always with you. Pack a few memorable items from home to combat homesickness. You'll be surprised at how effective and great this is. But at the same time, make sure that you also try and leave space for new things and for souvenirs. Again, too, we always hear from students that they feel like they packed a little too much, so make sure you always keep a little bit of space there. You can also check your pre-departure information in your ISEP portal if you have questions on whether you need to bring sheets or towels for your accommodations. So make sure you check that so you know what you can get once you get to Korea rather than having to pack it and take up space. So yes, lastly to do before you go. So just as a reminder for ISEP Direct students only, if you must pay your ISEP Direct program fee in your account, you must pay this at least 30 days before you start your program. So make sure you get that all squared away. As we mentioned before, check your data plan with your phone provider for international plans. So see if you can get that, or make sure that your phone is unlocked so you can get a local SIM card instead. Oftentimes you are going to have to try and pay off your phone if you're doing like a monthly payment or monthly lease before it's unlocked, just so you know. Make sure you know the date and location of your host site orientation and make sure you have that date in mind. Um, and also try and write down the address of where you're going and put it in your carry-on. Because again, anything can happen when you touch down. Maybe your phone's not connected, maybe it's dead, anything like that. So make sure you have it written down so you can at least use that if you're trying to get somewhere. But also try and make sure that if you're taking a taxi or rideshare from the airport, again, think is your phone going to work or are you going to have to get a SIM card? Did you already set up a pickup? It's not for a few hours. Make sure you understand what is going to happen. And make sure that you also keep electric copies of all your important documents and also try and upload them maybe to your Google Drive or anywhere that's secure and give access maybe to somebody you trust in case you need to print those again at any sort of or at any moment in time. So here are just some questions you want to ask yourself in terms of transportation to your host university. You want to know the answer to these questions, and if you don't, you want to ask your host ISEP coordinator so you know what you're going to do. So obviously the first thing is how you're going to get to your host university. Have you arranged an airport pickup and is that available? And if not, are you going to take public transportation or are you going to take a taxi? Especially for those who are coming through the Incheon International Airport, they have a service called like a limousine bus that you can use, which is really convenient because it's like a coach bus. You put your luggage at the bottom, and then you can ride that through the route that it goes through the city. So we recommend that sometimes, maybe more so than going through the subway, but it's up to you, whatever is going to work best depending on where you're going. You want to know when your housing check-in time is, understanding if you need to book a hotel, because for a lot of universities, they may not be open on the weekend. So if you're going to be coming at a time where they're not going to be able to welcome you, you want to make sure that you account for that. There's also, for example, again, too, at Incheon, there's places where you can take naps if you want, like napping stations. So you can also look into that too, just so you plan your timing well. How are you going to contact your host ISEP coordinator when you arrive? How will you pay for the transportation if necessary too? You may need cash. Sometimes you can also, you might not need cash too as well. You can also buy tickets, for example, for the limousine bus too, but make sure you know if you're going to need to get cash and how to get that money out. But you can also sometimes get local currency too, maybe before you get to Korea, but then you'll just have to decide whether you'll do that or use an ATM when you're at the airport. But yeah, so lastly, we'll talk about keeping in touch. So definitely determine before you leave how you're going to plan to stay in touch with your family and friends back home. Are you going to download WhatsApp? Are you going to use Facebook Messenger? Are you going to use Instagram? You should just check in with all of them again too, because it might take you a little bit to set everything up if you're going to use like a local number and change your phone number. So we do have tips for staying in touch on our ISEP website. I encourage you to check that out. And remember to contact your family once you're there. It can be really a lot, very overwhelming once you first get to your country. But definitely remember and set yourself a reminder to let your family know that you're safe. And lastly, make sure that you connect with ISEP students and share your story if you're interested. We love to hear how students are doing on their programs. We love to see your pictures, hear how much fun you're having. So you can use social media to connect with other ISEP students. We have a Facebook group, but we also have TikTok, X, and Instagram too as well. So please feel free to tag us. We will likely share your stories too as well. Another thing to add too, I'll let Brian speak to it if he wants to really quickly, is we also have events we try and hold for ISEP students as well. And we encourage you to go to them so you can connect with other ISEP students who are also in the local area. They are great events, great way to connect with the local culture, but also a great way to meet peers. So keep an eye out for that too. But yeah, that's the end of our presentation. Again, thank you everybody for watching. Feel free to reach out to us here at ISEP if you have any questions before your program starts. But otherwise, safe travels, good luck, and thank you.
See you in Korea.
Bye.